This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
We're here for Q&A 67.
67.
Working our way up.
Good.
No, it's a boring number.
Boring number. Sorry, 67.
Lame number.
You
But it won't be a lame Q&A.
67? 76, 67? All right, sorry. Weird piece of aside trivia that no one ever needed to know in the history of ever. My aunts wrote a musical as a gift, an anniversary gift maybe, for my grandparents? It might have been called 67, but that wouldn't make sense. They were married that long, but I don't think that's when they did the gift. Maybe it was 56, and that's what I got it wrong.
Your brain just has a memory of 67.
I know, my brain just does. Somewhere in there. Anyway, moving on. I think I'm the first one today.
You are. You get to kick it off.
All right. And I apologize, guys. I'm still running a little bit sick, so I'm a little bit gravelly and coffee today. All right, so the first one reads, "Hi, I've been really enjoying this podcast for the last few weeks as I get back into using DBT skills. My partner and I have had a rough month or so. We've been short with each other and not very kind and not doing a great job of compassion, caring for the other, and spending quality time. We had a really good mindful conversation a few nights ago about what was happening and what we wanted to change. We decided to work on a few things, spending quality time together by walking together every day, both of us using the stop skill when we're being unkind to each other, and trying to have more compassion in general for the other and believe in good intentions. I feel good about all of this and think it has already been a positive thing for us. What I'm still worried about and wanting advice about is my keeping from judging him / having him feel accepted. I have a bit of perfectionism where I expect an unrealistically perfect partner and can make comments at him for not being that. Sometimes, though, I struggle between what is reasonable and unreasonable. For instance, I have a lot of little things I'm uptight about around hygiene, how I want things cleaned, how I want things done, and I get stuck between thinking they're my own thing to deal with, or are they something he should be putting in an effort to work with? We also have talked about goals like mindful eating, for instance, and sometimes I make judgments or comments towards him because it feels to me like he's not practicing or even really trying mindful eating. I want to help him reach some of those goals too, but I don't know if I'm really doing that or if I'm just making him feel bad about it. Just trying to balance out both our needs and desires and hopefully have us in a place where we are both feeling happy, accepted, and loved."
I just realized in my notes, I'm not going to talk about anything DBT. Except for maybe at the beginning, I'm going to talk about dialectics.
So funny.
Dialectics are woven into so many things. I know, it's just so par for the course for us with Q&As, I feel like, where you take on, like, I'll talk about skills, and it just happens that way, and then I don't talk about anything skills-based. But hopefully it's helpful anyways, thoughts and reflections from my end. So the biggest thing that stood out to me with what this listener wrote was the question. I'm just going to repeat it here. The question of, is it my own thing or something he should be putting in effort to work with? And very strongly my answer was, it's both. So there's dialectics. It's both, right? And the reason why it's both is because we are all responsible for owning what our buttons are. I talk about this a lot with my clients, because we have that terminology of, like, pushing someone's buttons or that kind of thing. Every single human being walking this earth has buttons.
Word.
Why? Because we all went through growing up. We all went through being in a family of origin, and no family of origin is perfect. And we all have buttons. We all have things. Now, some people have more buttons, more complex buttons, but we all have them. So it's our responsibility to know what our buttons are. Because those things that bother us, it's not our partner's fault that we are bothered by that thing. That's us for why it's a button. And also, when we sign up to be in a relationship with somebody else, I view that as a commitment to understand and do our best to be kind to that person's buttons, our partner's buttons. What buttons do they have? And really making an effort to go, okay, because I love you, I'm going to do my best to not push your buttons. It doesn't mean the buttons won't get pushed. Trust me, they will. A lot. That's inevitable. But it's making the effort and setting the intention to say, I want to do my best to respect what your buttons are. So that's really what's going on here. You, listener, need to own your own buttons. And ideally, your partner would be working to do his best to touch them as little as possible. That's the goal. It also stood out to me, though. I mean, sometimes when listeners write into us, it's a thing where I'm like, oh, that person sounds very different from me, or, oh, that's a totally different situation than I've ever encountered in my life. Oh, that's interesting to hear that perspective, or that kind of a thing. And then sometimes we get listeners writing in where I'm like, oh, that's an email I could have written, or that's a post I could have made about my life. And this was one of those. I really related to this listener because I'm also a perfectionist, as all of you know by now if you've been listening to us long enough. I also have high standards for myself and other people. And so the work that I am doing myself in therapy, that my therapist keeps bringing me back to, is that it's not up to me to chart anybody else's path but my own. The other people in my life, whether it be my husband, whether it be my kids, whether it be my parents, whether it be my friends, my clients, whoever, everybody who I encounter, they are on their own life path, just as I am on my own life path too. And I might be looking over there being like, oh my God, their path is a mess. It's a mess. They should be doing this. They should be going this direction, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And at the end of the day, none of that matters because it's only up to them. So I have to keep coming back to whenever I want to put my attention on somebody else's path and what they are doing or not doing, or whether they're doing things I like or dislike, or judge as good or bad or that kind of a thing, is to recognize that I need to bring my attention back to my own path. And also that it just may be, again, that they have different goals than I do. Or again, an entirely different path to walk. And when it comes to that idea of goals or having things to work on or strive for, and, when you're kind of asking about well, we've talked about goals, and then I see him, with the mindful eating, and then I see him not really doing it. And then I comment on it because he's not doing the goal and that kind of a thing. That's something to be aware of, because it's not your job to make sure he's sticking with the goals. That's on him. He either will or he won't. And if he's not sticking to them, and if he actually sees that as a problem, eventually he'll probably make that known in some way, shape, or form. He might eventually say something like, yeah, I've really been wanting to do better with the mindful eating, and I've been struggling with it. And he might ask for help. He might not. But it's up to him to determine if that's a problem for himself, for his life, for his path. It's not up for you to judge it as a problem. So it can be really important before you might want to jump in and offer help, or to be like, oh, you could try this, or you could try that, or that kind of a thing. Make sure that people are actually wanting your help. I'm very guilty of this. I can absolutely offer help when it is not wanted. And then the other person just feels, again, judged, criticized, all of that by me. And then I feel upset with them because I'm like, they should be taking my help. No, they don't have to. So it's just important to also ask for consent. If you were to say something like, hey, I've noticed with the mindful eating, it doesn't seem like it's something you've been doing as much lately. And that's totally that's up to you. If you've decided you don't want to anymore, then that's your choice, and I'll respect it. Also, I do have an idea that could be helpful if you'd like it. And if, again, you're not interested, then that's okay too, right? People don't have to buy what you want to sell. So that could be an important thing to remember. So what about you, Kate? I'm looking at your notes. You have skills, which is great. You have a number of skills.
Well, it's kind of funny too. I have skills, and then my last thing, I was like, "Oh, I didn't read all the way through your notes, did I?" Because I kind of echo you on the last thing I asked.
That's okay.
But the first thing that I was thinking about was just what is this listener's priority in the situation. I don't remember which of the interpersonal module handouts it is, but one of them talks about, which is your top priority in any given interpersonal interaction. Is it the relationship? Is it an objective, or is it your self-esteem, self-worth, self-respect? That's what they use. Right. And so I was thinking, just from the way that this reader was relaying things, that I'm guessing that the relationship would count as their highest priority in that situation. So I was wondering if they might want to lean a little bit more on the give side of things, right? Which definitely would not necessarily look like giving help or suggestions, right? Give is very much not about advice, right? So, right, like if you're finding that there's tension or interpersonal work to be done, and your top priority is the relationship, I would definitely lean on give, perhaps with some intention in some of those interactions. I thought you also might benefit from doing a pros and cons around making statements like you do, right? Like what benefits come of it, what is the downside to it, what is the cost, etc. Right? You know what a pros and cons, and I don't know why I'm going through the whole thing, but it might just help to lay things out, right? It may not be so much that you're actually, I don't know, needing to weigh the decision so much as just it helps to see things sometimes written out, right? Like what are the motivations that I have? What's driving me towards this behavior, and what might sit as a motivator in the other direction. Also, just sort of generally speaking, checking in with your wise mind may also help, right? Pausing before, you guys, I think it says stop, practicing the stop skill when you're being unkind with each other, right? So that proceed mindfully bit. Right. Same idea. Right. Before you make some sort of commentary, see if you can check in with your wise mind about what's driving it. My guess is it's going to be emotion mind more often than not. So, right. See if you can bring some reason mind into the picture to get into your wise mind and see what that might have to say about the situation as opposed to your emotion mind. And then lastly, and this is more or less what Michelle was saying also, I just have the question, have you asked him if it feels supportive or judgmental? Right, the listener seemed to be wondering, right? Is this helpful or feel bad? I was like, have you asked the person? Because that's going to be individual, right? Whether that kind of thing feels supportive or judgmental. So, similar to the ask for consent before providing help, I might also say is how I'm providing help feel supportive or not, right? I think those are my thoughts. I know those are my thoughts. I don't know.
Great. Okay, the next one says, any suggestions for when anxiety has been high for a couple days and you're just tired? Everything feels deliberate and personal, but wise mind says it's not.
I mean, first of all, well done being able to still know what's going on in your wise mind after some days of high anxiety straight. So bravo to this listener there. And then, all right, so this is funny. Now I'm guilty of starting with something that's entirely non-DBT, but...
Well, we're going to talk about lots of skills between the two of us for this
That's
one,
true,
so.
Yes. But the first thing I wondered is suggesting to this listener that maybe they try turning towards their anxiety instead of away from it. Right? It's perfectly natural to try to stop feeling anxious, right? Feeling anxious is unpleasant. And so it's pretty normal and natural to turn away, run away, try and hide from, disown, get rid of, shut down stuff, whatever, right? Your anxiety. Surprisingly, quite often what I have had clients report as being helpful instead is to orient towards your anxiety, kind of welcome it, and check in with what it's trying to tell you or what it's trying to ask you to do. Maybe it's trying to ask you to do something totally impossible, and you just have to be like, oh, I hear you. I understand why I want that. Totally impossible, but I validate the shit out of myself, right? That could be. Maybe it's something you can totally do and would be a good idea. I don't know. Anxiety sometimes has really helpful things to say, and sometimes it's gibberish, right? So, but it's hard to know that, right, before turning towards it and giving it a moment to have a voice, right? If you're someone who can picture things, I find it helpful to imagine your anxiety kind of like a toddler who's been trying to pull on your pant leg and is throwing a tantrum of some sort. right? You know, scoop it up into your lap and be like, what's up, buddy? Like, what's going on? And maybe it just screams at you nonsensically, and maybe it tells you the fucking curtains are on fire. I don't know. But, right, just like that toddler, whether the thing the toddler has to say is actually reasonable or not, the toddler still deserves your loving and compassionate attention and to be heard out. So does your anxiety. And, just like a toddler often will calm down and go the fuck away after you've paid it the attention that it's looking for, your anxiety will often calm down and go the fuck away after you've given it the time and attention that it's been looking for. So if you're running away from it, which is pretty natural and normal, try not. Try turning towards it. Try welcoming it. Try being compassionate and gentle towards it for a minute. Also, I was thinking, they say when your anxiety has been riding high, that can mean so many different things to so many different people. So I'm not saying this is appropriate for this listener, but if your anxiety being high looks anything like my anxiety being high, you might try going for some tip skills before moving towards much of anything else, right? When my anxiety is high, that looks like panic attacks, right, for me. So that is I need to bring myself physiologically down a few pegs before I can engage in some of the other skills. So just in case that's what high anxiety looks like for this person, I thought I'd put that out there. And also, if your anxiety is particularly thought-based, my anxiety is almost entirely somatic. Quite frustrating. Why are you anxious, Kate? I have no idea. My body is just doing that. But if it's thought-based instead, you might try using some accepts. I find to be especially helpful if you're stuck in something that's more like rumination or worrying. And that's really what you mean by your anxiety being high. See if you can bump your brain off that track for a while through some of the accept skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those are really good skills to name. There were two pieces, I suppose, that I really saw with what this listener was saying. Yes, it's a very short question, but the two things that I really saw contained here that they were wanting help with is, how do I get my brain off of the track of thinking that everything is personal when my anxiety is really high, right? I know it's not personal, but my brain tells me it is. So what do I do to change that? And then, what do I do when I'm tired? I may be just fatigued and worn out from feeling so anxious. So I touched on both of those things in my response. So with everything feels personal, let's think about what skills could be helpful with that. The skill that, I don't know, practically screamed at me was check the facts. So I was imagining this of, I don't know, let's say you're at home by yourself and you just can't stop ruminating about something that someone said or did earlier in your day when you were around them. And your brain is telling you that it's, deliberate and personal, to use the listener's words that they mentioned. Check the facts would be good. And I feel like I've been saying this more lately because I love the shortcut of check the facts of what do I actually know. And I also have been saying a lot lately to people, sometimes you just need to go all in and do that worksheet. Yep. This may be a actually do a worksheet type of moment for check the facts with things that other people might have said or done to you that felt personal. If you are in the moment, though, let's say you are actively talking to somebody and they say or do something and your mind goes, oh, that feels very personal and attacking and they're only doing that because of me or, whatever the specific thoughts are. If you are in the moment with somebody and your brain starts to drift off in that direction, then I would go with stop. And when you are doing stop, you can definitely do what Kate suggested, right? When you are taking a break or taking a step back, let me make sure I get the acronym right. Doesn't actually say take a break, but that's often what it looks like. But when you're taking a step back, you can do tip. You can do accepts. You can do some of those things so that then, as Kate was acknowledging, then you can get the anxiety down enough so that you can actually observe and proceed mindfully. So stop is a good one if it's happening in real time. The, thought process of, this feels personal. With the fatigue, when you've just been in that anxious place for days and it's just wearing you out, I thought improve or self-soothe could be helpful for that part of things. Those are both skills that I view as being pretty kind and gentle to ourselves. Improve in particular, I think doing some of those things can help boost up our batteries. Just a little bit, right? It's not going to take you from like, oh, my battery's at 15% to now I'm at 90. It's not going to work like that, but it can nudge you up a little bit when you're showing that kindness to yourself that I think comes with improve. And self-soothing also, like Kate, you were saying, you know, about like kind of meeting your anxiety. How would you meet your fatigue? How would you just be like, yeah, I am tired. So because I'm tired, what do I do while I sit here with my fatigue? And doing self-soothing in that context can be nice. To just be like, yep, okay, time to light a candle, wrap myself in a blanket, and just really, you know, tend to my body physically. Because also, as Kate acknowledged, you know, anxiety for some people is more mental. That's definitely how it shows up more for me. When I'm anxious, my brain just will not shut up. Body-wise, I feel okay, but my brain won't stop. Or it can be very physical, like you were talking about, Kate, where it's just kind of like my heart's beating fast, I'm sweating, all the things are starting to happen, but my brain feels okay. Like I can't notice anything discernible that I'm perseverating on or thinking about, but my body is just kicking into anxiety. What's going on here? But yeah, especially if you are body-based with your anxiety, self-soothe will be helpful. And normally we wouldn't recommend self-soothe for, again, like, hi, anxiety. That's not the way to use it. But just, yeah, when anxiety lives in your body and then you're fatigued after experiencing it, and doing something more body-based could help with that. So that's what I think.
Okay, on to... Wait. Oh, okay. Second to last one. I get lost sometimes in the middle. This one reads, I have a unique situation. My husband is great, but he does have issues with alcohol. He's not drinking on a daily basis and is not often drunk, but his drinking has been an issue which pops up as a problem about 5 to 10 times each year. The issue is him being drunk is a huge trigger for me. Obviously, we need to work on his problem and his deception regarding it, but addressing it in the moment is obviously useless, as he is not in a frame of mind to have a conversation at that time. It's not the time for a dear man, for sure. I am wondering what skills you would recommend I use in that moment, often in the middle of the night. It feels like radical acceptance or something like it, but that does not seem to send me back to bed. Maybe cope ahead, but I'm wondering if there is something I'm missing that would be helpful.
Yeah, Kate and I acknowledged actually before we started recording this Q&A, I said something like, you know, in every Q&A, it almost feels like there's one question that we get that I could record an entire Q&A on just this question because I have so much to say. And I'm like, okay, but it's not the only question. I'll try to rate it in. But I do want to give a little bit of background here as we answer this one, which I've mentioned it, I'm sure, here and there. But I definitely talk about this more on our other podcast, The Couch and the Chair, specifically in an episode that we posted. I looked up the date, April 30th, 2021. We talked about this topic of what it's like to be in a relationship with somebody who struggles with addiction, because I was in a relationship with somebody who is an alcoholic prior to being in the relationship I'm in now with my husband. And so I talk much more in depth in that episode about my personal experiences with this topic, but suffice it to say, listener, I have been there. So I do have some degree of empathy for what you are going through and how hard it is. And I just wanted to name that because sometimes it can feel really lonely to be in a relationship with somebody who's struggling with addiction, especially that addiction that other people aren't necessarily going to see. And what I mean by that is that the outside world might look at your partner and go, oh, well, he's going to work. He's not getting, belligerent every night. He doesn't appear to have health problems. How bad could it be? And it's like you said, and this was my experience too, most days, it's not a problem until it is. And when it is a problem, it is a problem. So, yeah, I understand that nuance of what you're talking about. As far as skills go, I understand that you're asking about something very specific, which I am going to get to when you're like, what do I do basically in the middle of the night when he is intoxicated and it's, a problem for me and it's a trigger for me that he's drinking like this and that kind of a thing. What do I do in that specific context of it being the middle of the night? And I'll get there. I promise. But first thing that felt important was, in general, when it comes to his drinking, you need to think about what's going to be a plan for you. You mentioned at the end, maybe cope ahead. Absolutely cope ahead. I'm all about that as a skill to use here, right? Cope ahead is all about imagining what is likely to actually happen with the situation. So given what you know of his history with drinking and how he tends to behave, imagining him acting like that and you deciding what you are going to do to take care of you when he is behaving in that way. I don't even necessarily want you to think about, well, how do I talk to him? How do I make us okay, right? The relationship okay when he's drinking like this. I want you to put all that to the side and focus on how you're going to take care of you. If you need a roadmap to doing that this is not DBT. Sidebar, but this is a very, very good resource, is the book Get Your Loved Ones Sober. I do not like the title, but I love the book. It's a really helpful book that I also went through and read personally when I was in my previous relationship. So it's really helpful to help you figure out how you can take care of yourself when you are in a relationship with somebody who's struggling with addiction. I was curious, skills-wise, if maybe part of taking care of yourself might be doing accepts a little bit. Accepts could help in terms of like, okay, when he drinks, how am I going to, as I put it sometimes, change the channel in my brain off of focusing on his drinking and onto doing something for me? How could I do that? Right? And you might decide to do some of the things from accepts as a way to change that channel and as a way to take care of yourself. I think there are some lovely things in accepts, especially just the general A for activities that can be nice ways to take care of yourself. Here's the caveat. With the specific thing about the middle of the night that you're discussing, that recommendation of using accepts would be more if you are, awake and going about your day and he starts drinking, right? Okay. That's when I would use accepts. If you are asleep and it is the middle of the night, and he is drinking and you become aware of it, or again, you're just having a hard time sleeping in the middle of the night because it's like he started drinking hours ago and I can't get to bed because I'm thinking about it. Accepts would not be a skill to use in the middle of the night. It's not going to help you get back to sleep. So what I would recommend for those specific middle of the night situations when you are wanting to sleep, I would just come up with, like a simple mantra that you can tell yourself, or a meditation that you can do. Also using the resource Insight Timer. That app is amazing. You can find a meditation for anything you want, for any length of time you want, like anything. So you might decide, okay, if it's the middle of the night and I just can't get to sleep, I'm going to do something from Insight Timer. They especially have a lot of meditations for sleep to help you get to sleep or go back to sleep if you have woken up in the middle of the night. So I would keep it really simple with the middle of the night stuff when you want to go back to sleep. I hear you on the radical acceptance piece. And again, reading the book of Get Your Loved Ones Sober will help with that. But again, I would not be trying to tackle radical acceptance in the middle of the night. I think that is just too high of a bar. That's what I would say. And also, you mentioned that it's not the time for a dear man, and I will just validate you there that absolutely This is not the time to try to communicate with him or work on doing things differently. The middle of the night is not that time. See if you can have conversations during the day when he's sober to talk about this if opportunities present themselves. And I would also specifically do cope ahead for conversations. So there's a lot of things you could do cope ahead around, but that could be one of them. So I'm just going to summarize real briefly because I've thrown out a lot of things and then we'll move on to you, Kate. But here's what I would say, right? Middle of the night stuff, if you're trying to get back to sleep and you're awake, do something simple with a mantra meditation. If you are awake, just going about your daily life, practice some cope ahead and practice acceptance if you want to accepts if you want to change the channel in your brain. That's what I would recommend. Okay.
I like it. It's funny, Kate. Michelle, you saying no, like not no radical acceptance in the middle of the night. I totally agree with you. Not contradicting it at all. But you know what it did make me think of? You might be able to do willingness though. I bet I could, right?
Like just adopting a willing approach, turning the mind.
Exactly, yeah, right? Like, because at least for me, part of my distress around drinking with my partners and things that keep me agitated is like, this shouldn't be happening. He's not supposed to do this. Like, why? Like that, why this? I don't want it. Like, just a lot of fighting stuff, right? Like, and I know it's not quite getting to all the way to radical acceptance, but just starting to be like, but this is where I am, so how can I take care of myself, right? Like, just like fighting it doesn't help me take care of myself. Fighting it keeps me in this agitated place where I can't necessarily engage my skills because I'm focused on fighting. So it's not, I endorse that you're not going to get all the way to radical acceptance at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
But just this little shift, this little tweak, like towards some willingness, because I know I at least get willful as fuck on this subject.
I think too, yeah, totally. And there maybe could be a distinction between, like, I was thinking of it as them being like, I need to kind of just radically accept my situation in the sense of like, I have to just radically accept that my husband's an alcoholic and that, you know, and I don't know.
Oh, yeah, bigger stuff.
He has no desire to
right
change or stuff. Exactly. That's what I was just thinking of as you were talking, which is a good reminder of like, or can you just radically accept this moment? And that we would encourage you to do, right? Okay, right now, even though I wish he wasn't drinking, he is.
Yep.
So now what
spending
do
my
I
energy
do
on he shouldn't. Right? I don't want him to. Why is this happening again? Like spending time in there ain't getting you shit. Ask me how I know.
Yep. You know this world well, too. So anyway, yep, we've been here.
Yep, I wasn't thinking about that at all until you said that. And I was like, actually, I think there's a little spot for that willingness shift. Anyway, but that wasn't even in my notes. I just thought about that while you were talking. The first thing I thought about was self-soothing, right? For in the middle of the night. I'm telling people, there ain't no shame. Harken back to childhood. Put on some fucking lullabies. Hells to the yes. Cuddle with a big pillow or a stuffed animal or a balled up blanket. Wrap yourself in a blanket if you're someone who's like me and likes a little bit of that confinement or weighted blanket kind of feel. If you're someone who doesn't have a problem with dairy products, warm milk really does actually release, like it has a neurochemical impact. It is soothing. Right. There's just be sweet, be kind, right? Like just be gentle with your physical self in those times, would be one of the first things I think about. It's kind of funny. The next thing is just something that I know I struggle with, which is being willing to take space. Like I can sometimes feel guilty or judgmental or other things if I want to be away from my partner in those states. So just an encouragement to be willing to take space if that's what you need, right? To feel okay. That it's okay to prioritize yourself in those moments in that way. Super liked Michelle's idea of a mantra. And one of the things that I thought about sort of in conjunction with that, right, I think we're both sort of thinking there are things you can do in the moment, and then there are things you can maybe do outside of the moment to prepare, like cope ahead, right, as an outside of the moment thing. My outside of the moment thing would be, I don't remember if I've talked about it on the podcast yet, but mala beads are a thing that I use for this. But basically anything where you take a mantra and just do it over and over and over again. So this would be something like, I don't know, I am making this shit up and pulling it out of my ass right now, listener. But for me, at least, it might be something like, his drinking has nothing to do with me. I'm allowed to take care of myself. right? Something like that, right? Like some sort of reminder, like whatever you know that you maybe lose sight of or need to be grounded in when he's drinking. See if you can't find a mantra to repeat to reinforce that message to yourself so it's more accessible in those moments of higher distress. And then no, that was it. I was going to say, and then the last thing is, that was the last thing. That was my last thing. Awkward segue. Michelle.
All right. We are on to the last one for today. Ta-da! Okay, this one says, "Hi, Kate and Michelle. I feel like I am at a complete loss. My therapist doesn't know what to do with me anymore. I should point out that it's not her fault. Over the years, I've been showing up but not doing the work to get better. I push right up on the edge of boundaries, and I think my therapist has had enough. She said she can't work harder than me, which I understand, but I just can't help it. Don't get me wrong, I have made plenty of progress, but when things get hard, I push back or refuse to do anything. I don't understand why I'm like this. It's extremely frustrating for both of us. She has been so kind and patient, but during our last session, I felt like she was almost threatening me or giving me an ultimatum. Either I call to make an appointment with a psychiatrist, or she calls my parents. And yes, she does have a valid reason to call them, or calls the police to do a wellness check, which would likely end in me being hospitalized. She knows I don't want either of these things to happen. I know she's worried about me, but this doesn't feel like the correct way to go about this. I'm just at a complete loss and don't know what to do. Should I just stop seeing her? It can't be a healthy therapeutic relationship if I'm feeling threatened. Or am I just overreacting? I feel so lost and alone and scared, and I don't know what to do. Thank you for taking the time to read this."
Yeah. Oh, my heart just feels achy for this listener. That sounds like a hard place to be. So the first thing I'll start with is I have long held the philosophy that there's no such thing as an overreaction. I see overreactions as signposts to where a wound is, right? Sort of like if you patted someone on the back and they screamed, you might think they were overreacting and crazy until you found out that they had just had surgery where you patted them and you caused them enormous pain. And now you're like, oh, with that context, that isn't an overreaction at all. So the first curiosity I had reading this was just, what's the wound here? Like, what's getting poked? What button, to harken back to language from earlier in the episode, what button is getting pushed here that is making this feel so threatening, right? That word is what's coming up here and that this strong of a response is happening. I don't think things are overreactions. I think, quote unquote, overreactions are signposts to some underlying wound. So I thought maybe doing some exploration there might help with that with that listener. Now I'm talking like I'm the therapist, the podcaster. Mm-hmm. Speaking as a therapist, I will say I have had times as a therapist thinking that I might need to take actions like your therapist is suggesting doing, listener. And I will say it can be a really scary and dilemma-filled space, right? It's hard to weigh the balance between rapport and safety. Right? You don't want to ruin rapport if it's not necessary. And also, what the fuck does rapport matter if your client is dead? Right? And so that's a tough place to be. And now you're a therapist. I don't know anything. And I long learned that there are plenty of therapists in the world that are shit. But I'm going to go and just have the benefit of the doubt for this therapist. Maybe they don't deserve it. But just in case they do, I would like to hope that your therapist is doing what they are because they value your safety over your opinion of them or over your relationship, which hurts and is hard, right? It's hard to make that choice, but I've had moments where I had to decide that person staying alive was worth it, even if they hated me for it. So I hope that rather than coming from a place of threat, I hope that your therapist is coming from a place of concern, and just doesn't feel like she has other options for what to do to keep you safe. That being said, I super understand how abandoning that may feel, though, too, right? To be like, I can't do this anymore unless you do these things, right? Like that does. I mean, I don't want to say it feels like an ultimatum. Technically it is, right? Like I'm with you, right? And ultimatums feel scary and threatening and abandoning and all sorts of things. So I don't in any way want to invalidate the emotional response that you're having. And just as a therapist, I'm hoping I can lay in a little bit of insight for where your therapist may be coming from. that's a tough, weird fucking space to really know that your relationship is the thing you want the most, other than that person to continue living, right? And that's just a hard space to make decisions in. I did think that maybe it might help to do some pros and cons around leaving the relationship with the therapist, right? What do you get with staying? What do you get with leaving, etc.? And also just maybe engaging in some self-soothing and wise mind practices just to see if you can find some peace and some sense of direction moving forward. And it sounds reasonably so, like you maybe are pretty agitated. If, as you say, as your therapist calling would likely lead to you being hospitalized, I'm going to guess that distress is running pretty high in your world right now. And so taking some time to self-soothe and enter into a wise mind kind of place and see what shows up for you there when you can be a little bit calmer and peaceful and more quiet. Those are my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice skills to build in there. I definitely like the pros and cons idea.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah. My brain also went to where yours went, Kate. We get listeners writing into us about their therapists pretty often. And we have had times where pretty clearly, I think we're both sitting there being like, what the fuck is going on with this therapist? Right?
It's true.
We've had some pretty strong reactions in the past with some of the things we've had listeners tell us where we are just like, nope, that's absolutely not okay. Da 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 da. And I have the same response as you. I'm not saying I'm on the therapist side, right? I don't think there are necessarily sides here, but I also initially went to a little bit of a devil's advocate stance for the therapist of this is a part of our job that is really hard and really difficult. But at baseline, we need, it's like ethically and legally, like a thing in our profession where we do need to take steps if we think our client is at serious risk of, harming themselves or harming another person, really creating serious long-term damage. We do need to do things about that. And so what I heard in what this listener shared about their therapist is that their therapist isn't wanting to just jump to that. Their therapist wants to say, look, I just need to see you take a step in this direction. Like going to see a psychiatrist would be enough for me to not take these actions that I'm starting to really think I may need to take to keep you safe. So I want to give you a chance to do the thing that arguably would maybe be like the lesser intervention of going to a psychiatry appointment than to up my interventions of calling your parents or calling the police. I'm just not immediately jumping to those things. I want to give you a chance to do something to show me I don't need to do those things because I don't want to. That was my sense. I don't know that for sure, but I could respect where the therapist was coming from on that. But the biggest thing that I took away from reading this was this listener spoke really well to the dynamic with the therapist and has so much self-awareness. I was just like, damn, listener, you really know yourself. You can say, I don't understand why I'm like this. That's fine. How many of us really fully understand why we do the things we do or why we are the way we are? But you see what you're doing. You know your pattern. Amazing. So because you know it and you spelled it out for us pretty clearly here, I really was just wondering to myself, I'm like, have you named it like this for your therapist? Have you been able to say, I push right up on the edge of boundaries? When things get hard, I push back and I refuse to do anything and I see that I'm doing this? Does your therapist know that you see this about yourself? Because this is the thing to work on, because my guess, a lot of times what happens is that the therapeutic space is like this microcosm of the real world, right? So if something's showing up in therapy in the relationship between a therapist and client, chances are that client has a similar dynamic with other people in their life. So when you say that this is your dynamic with your therapist, that basically she kind of pushes you a little bit to do something and you push right back and you dig in your heels and you're like, nope. I would really encourage you, if you haven't thought about it already, or if your therapist hasn't prompted you to think about it already, where are you doing that in other areas and with other people in your life? Because I can almost guarantee that's happening elsewhere as well. So that was my first thing. Name it with your therapist of like, I'm seeing what I do, and work to explore that and consider where else you're doing that. Because my hope, and I'll be honest, I did this with my therapist today. I had a therapy session right before this, and I said to my therapist, I was like, I think I'm misreading you, but you're saying something that's kind of hard for me to hear. And she was basically like, tell me what it is that you think I'm saying. So I told her, I said, I think you're saying that I shouldn't be doing blah, 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 blah. And she said, okay, I'll clarify for you, right? She's like, that isn't what I'm saying. What I am saying is, X, Y, and Z. And I was like, oh, okay. And we cleared it up. Bada bing, bada boom, right? It doesn't always go that easily or that simply. But my hope is that if you name for your therapist, look, yeah, this is the dynamic that I'm seeing. What can we do to help me with this dynamic? That your therapist will stay in there with you. Everyone deserves a therapist where the client can come to the therapist and say, look, you're saying or doing things I don't like and that are hard for me. Yes. And the therapist is going to hold space for that and really be able to look at themselves and go, what am I trying to say? Or why would this be hard for this client? Or what might I need to change? Or that kind of a thing. And you're not just going to get a therapist that then fires you over that. So I want to believe that openly talking about this with your therapist will help things get better. But if it doesn't get better, and if you don't feel like your therapist is really helping you, if it doesn't start to feel safer or better after you kind of challenge your therapist and again, like name what's going on for you, that is what I view as problematic. I don't view it as problematic that this dynamic is here. I view it as problematic if the two of you can't work to start shifting it. That's what I would say. And I wouldn't just expect it to get shifted in like a session or 3. I mean, really give it a couple of months to see if things will get better. And hopefully they will, but they're not going to get better unless you really call it out into the open to say, I see it and I want to change this. That opens the door. That's what I would say.
I like it. All right. That wraps up 67.
It does, yep.
All right. Well, if you would like to have your questions, comments, or concerns in a future Q&A, please feel free to email us, dbtnmepodcast@gmail.com, or post in the Facebook group, which is where a lot of these come from also. So, yeah, this has been great. We look forward to 68. Haha, that rhymed a little bit. That's nice. And Jin says, hi, everybody. He's in my lap.
Yes.
Very cute.
Jin is here. Yes. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT and Me Podcast.